Good morning, YouTubers, Facebookers, skeptics, and truthers alike. I wanted to hop on here this morning, thinking on the way to work here, man. I want to talk about Antoine Bechamp. I want to talk about the medical takeover, historical events they won't teach you in school. Early 1900s. You had two biochemists. One was a synthetic biochemist and one was an organic biochemist. You have Antoine Bechamp, who was an organic biochemist. He was addressing things from a natural approach. He was addressing the body as a terrarium. It's kind of the ideal of soil, putting seeds in soil. Okay, if the soil's not ready, or if the soil is contaminated, the seed will not flourish. Same goes for the body with these so-called germs, which is Louis Pasteur's ideology. Okay, I'll stick on Bechamp. Bechamp was addressing things from a nutritional standpoint. He was studying the body. He was studying deficiencies. He was studying balancement. He had great success rates. But then you had this other biochemist, Louis Pasteur. He was taking things from their organic state and synthesizing it, making it unnatural. Things that are unnatural are patentable, which are profitable. J.D. Rockefeller, first billionaire on this planet from monopolizing oil. He seen money in it. So he teamed up with Andrew Carnegie and J.P. Morgan. These three elite billionaires sunk millions into billions into Pasteur's studies, which was like fermentation, germinization, vaccinations. These were his patentable ideals, his ideologies. Pasteur believed that the body contracts and catches diseases. That's not true. This is where lobbied science began. And it was almost overnight that these elite billionaires were able to buy out school boards. Because what they would do, they would go to these school boards that were lacking funds, got the school boards together and told them, hey, look, we'll give you this large sum of money, but we expect to put a couple people on your school board to see that our money is spent wisely. And this is how they took over school boards. Systematically, over the years, into generations, they, like I said, systematically removed bits and pieces from studies. Hence that why we fast forward to today. You go to emergency room and sick, not a single nurse, not a CNA, not a LPN, not a RN, not even the MDs can identify the signs and symptoms of deficiencies, let alone correct them by telling them the correct nutritional properties and food to eat to create that balance back. And like what I was saying, the body is a terrarium, as Bechamp was teaching. And it's like if you put a seed in soil, that soil has to be the right environment for that seed to flourish. Otherwise, that seed is going to rot out and die. This is the same thing with our bodies. If the body is correctly balanced with the right consumptions, which ultimately leads to your gut flora, the fermentation process of the food you eat through your digestive tract creates bacteria. Depending on what type of food you eat, determines if you have a hydrogen-rich bacteria or an acidic bacteria. Okay, a hydrogen-rich bacteria, if that's the environment, and you contract or are exposed to a toxin, the body has something called exosome cells. These exosome cells free flow through all of our bodily fluid, whether it's our stomach acid, whether it's our saliva, our urine, our blood, our sweat. These exosome cells are an excretion of our white cells. They make these things with the intent to clean and scrub foreign contaminants. So if this exosome cell comes in contact with a contaminant, it's going to mutate. It's going to mutate into one of two things, which depends on the bacterial environment it has to feed off of. If it's a hydrogen-rich bacteria, which is created from live fruits and vegetables, also known as prebiotics and probiotics. Now, if this is the bacterial environment this contaminated cell has to feed off of, it's going to mutate it into what we know as an antibody. Because an exosome cell identified under an electron microscope is RNA. And this is how they teach half-truths when they say RNA creates DNA. That there is truth to that. But what they're not teaching is the bacterial environment determines what this cell turns into. Okay, because this contaminated exosome cell feeds off this hydrogen-rich bacteria. It creates an antibody. This antibody teaches the body how to protect itself from this contaminant in future exposures. Our problem is, and what they're not teaching us, we consume a highly acidic diet here in the in our Western country, in the United States. And they do too, most everywhere else. But here it's really bad because elite corporations have taken over. They've taken over, they've engineered this social structure. They engineered our health system, the food distribution. And this is what they're not teaching. Okay, we eat these foods, these high fructose corn syrup drinks, and all this sugar that they put inside of all of our foods, all these breads and the meats and the cheeses and the milks and the alcohols and the average shit we eat on a daily. Okay, when we eat these foods, it creates an acidic bacteria, also known as Candida albicans. Candida albicans, if this is the bacterial environment that these contaminated cells have to feed off of, it can't create antibodies. This is where they falsely indoctrinate our medical industry. Because the fact of the matter is, you cannot create immunity if you can't create antibodies. If your body does not have that hydrogen-rich bacteria to mutate the contaminated cell into an antibody, you cannot create immunity. RNA cannot create DNA. In that sense, what the body creates, that contaminated cell, it sees it doesn't have the right bacterial environment, so it creates what we know as a virus. And these viruses are designed as a defensive mechanism for our body. They're created to flush ourselves. Hence why our temperature rises and we sweat. Hence why we cough. Hence why fluids build up in the lungs. Hence why mucus and phlegm builds up in our throat and snot and boogers in our nasal passage. These are all different contaminated exosome cells. And what happens is it compromises our mucous membrane. So wherever these contaminated cells are, it starts creating mucus to protect ourselves, to help flush it. It's like a lubrication to flush this shit out of us. And this, like I said, if you go back to the studies of Bechamp, he's teaching us this. This is how we address the root causes to our plaguing health statistics. This is how we cure cancer. This is how we cure diseases. I personally firsthand seen this stuff. Experienced it on myself from being sick a week out of a month. Having migraines 5 out of 7 days of the week. To me asking my own question. This is a better part of a decade ago that I started asking my own questions. I started studying. I had the